Okay, uh, doing a microphone check. Can anyone tell me if they can hear me? All right, wonderful, wonderful. All right, thank you all so much for attending. The purpose of this live stream is because we are moving into the growing season and it's pretty much crunch time. This will be pretty much the 1 to 2 busiest months of gardening. And I had a live stream 2 weeks ago, but not everybody could attend. And I wanted to have another. And my goal is to have several of these throughout late winter, early spring to try and help as many of you as possible get on the right track for the new growing season and hopefully help you have the best possible growing season that you can have. I would love to do anything I possibly can to help you all be successful. Uh, I'm going to basically go through the live stream active comments and I will answer as many questions as I can for the next 60 to 90 minutes or until my voice gives out. So fire away with any questions that you may have. Jacob V, I'll start with you. Have you tried growing epazote? I don't even know what that is, I don't think. Um, I'm not particularly familiar with that, so the answer to that would be no. John Johnson, getting 2 peach and 2 pear trees next month. Any tips to help get them established and thriving? Zone 6B. Yes, make sure that you plant them while the soil, after the soil is workable, so it's no longer freezing, but plant them while the trees are still dormant and have not budded out yet. So that's probably going to be pretty darn soon to write about now because what happens is when you get them in ground, they'll stay dormant longer and they will be less likely to bud out a little bit early and then suffer some kind of late frost and freeze damage, and you can get a little bit of additional establishment. Now, what you need to do is not rush the process because trees build foundations before they build any kind of top growth. So those trees are going to appear to do absolutely nothing for the first year and a half or 2 years, but what they're actually doing is growing roots in ground. And they're not going to put on significant vertical growth until they anchor themselves pretty well. So you just have to be patient. They're going to spend about 2 years building roots. The third year is probably when they're going to put on the most vertical growth. So don't rush around too much. Make sure you give the trees everything they need. Fertilize them when you plant them. Give them fertilizer in late winter, early spring, every single year. Keep a nice thick layer of compost and mulch around them at all times. And around year 3 is when you'll start seeing probably some type of harvest or a lot of vertical growth. And then year 4 is when you should get a really good harvest on them. Branch Vine, do you have a Panache Tiger striped fig? No, I do not have that one. And the reason why is it is notoriously bad in rain. It's supposedly fantastic in California and in other dry summer climates like Arizona, Texas, etc. But it is notoriously bad for the southeast, and it's a later ripening fig, so it can be tough for the northeast. So no, I don't have that one, but I have had it before, and it is quite good. If you have dry summers, it's a real winner. Matthew Dahl, are the 15 gallery nursery grade pots in your store adequate for northern high bush blueberry plants and other dwarf fruit trees? I have never grown blueberries in containers, and I would be reluctant to do so because they're so easy to grow in ground for the most part. I always recommend growing something in ground if you can. Blueberries make fantastic shrubbery plantings. So even if you don't have room in your backyard, you could always plant them around your house. So I would tell you, if you can put them in ground, do so. But that being said, if I can get 50 to 100 figs off of a container tree, then I don't see why they couldn't grow in a container. So I would think they'd be okay. The 15-gallon pots that I use are absolutely incredible for fig trees, and they should do well for most dwarf trees, provided you keep them at, I would say, 4 to 5 feet height or less. If you let them get taller than that, you risk the container being too small. Honestly, my fig trees, I probably keep them at no taller than 3 to 4 feet. Any more than that, and you might run into problems because you're dealing with a root mass of that big. So when you have a small root mass, you can only support so much top growth. So you're going to want to make sure that you prune them adequately every single year in the winter, because they're only going to be able to grow up, an extra foot or two each year. So if you don't prune them, they're going to top out and they're going to get stuck. James Shurry, will boiling water kill fungus gnats in potting soil? The answer is yes, but I can't guarantee it will kill 100% of them, because depending on, there's a thing, pasteurization temperature. You have to bring it up to a certain level of heat. You have to bring it up to a certain temperature and hold it there for a long enough period of time to sterilize it. So if you pour boiling water into your potting mix, it probably will kill some, but not all. The best way to ensure that your potting mix is sterilized is to actually bake it in the oven. So you can go to, a grocery store and get those big, easy foil disposable containers that are made to cook a turkey in. They're really big, and you can get one for $3 or $4. You can put the potting mix in that and then bake it in your oven for 30 minutes at 300 degrees. You can stick a meat thermometer in there, and if you can get it up to 180, 200 degrees, that's pretty much going to sterilize everything. So that is a much better method if you can do it. Holy smokes, blockchain backer. Thank you so much for the contribution. I really appreciate it so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That means a lot. A. Patterson, do you have any dwarf figs, and what is your opinion on them? My opinion is that there is no such thing as a dwarf fig, not in the sense that there are, dwarf apples and dwarf peaches that are truly dwarf trees because they graft them onto a specifically dwarfing rootstock. Figs aren't really dwarfs. Figs are kind of like mangoes, where there are no true dwarfs, but there are only ones that have lower vigor than others. So figs, I don't see a need to get a dwarf variety, specifically because you can prune the heck out of a fig. You can cut a fig back 60, 70%, no problem, and it'll grow 10 feet tall the next season. So in that sense, all figs are dwarf figs because they can be killed to the ground and they'll grow right back 8 to 10 feet tall in a single year. So really, all you have to do is you can grow any fig tree you want. Just make sure you prune it and keep it small and just maintain it at that size. Fig trees can take it, so they're very unique in that sense. Gina, thank you so much for the contribution. I really, really appreciate that. I live in Wilmington. How do you deal with fire ants? They have taken over my compost and also one of my raised beds, and I would like to avoid chemicals. So I made a video about 3 years ago called How to Make Your Yard Ant-Free Forever. When I moved here 7 years ago, my yard was an absolute nightmare because it was straight pine sand, and I couldn't walk 10 feet without getting attacked by fire ants. Now I have a fire ant population of 0, and in order to stop the fire ants, you basically have to take 3 different steps. And unfortunately, the only way I've found to get rid of the problem once you have it, if it's significant, is to use chemicals. But if you use the chemicals responsibly, you can only use it once or maybe twice, and then you don't have to use it again. So what I would recommend you do is you go out and you get something like lawn granules, and you specifically spread them only in the areas that are affected to treat the problem. So if you have, like I have lots of clover in my lawn that the bees like to visit, I specifically didn't treat those areas. I treated the areas around them. And if you take the perimeter, once you kill the initial infestation, you can just spread the granules in kind of like a big rectangle around your yard, where you just create a perimeter of the granules. So the ants would have to basically walk through a minefield to get in your yard. So that will control them. Once you get rid of the big infestations and you don't have a big population of them, you never really have to use the granules again. You can get yourself something like the Amdro ant bait product, and you can just put a half teaspoon around the fire ant hills as they pop up. That's what I do. I do a once a week patrol of my yard in the summer, and if I see a fire ant mound, I'll just spot treat it with the smallest amount of the bait granules, and that will kill them overnight. From there, you can make your yard mostly ant-free by engaging in lots of composting and mulching. Ants need soil that holds shape, structure, in order to build their colonies. So they really like the pine sand around here because that holds incredible shape. They'll also like dry clay soil out west because they can drill holes in it and make tunnels and it'll hold. If you add enough mulch everywhere, they can't dig in that. So long-term composting and mulching to build really loamy soil, it's hard for them to build in. So if you make your soil nice enough, if you put like a landmine perimeter of some kind of like a bifenthrin granule around your yard, and then just spot treat with the Amdro ant bait as individual colonies pop up, you can have a relatively ant-free yard and not have to really use any chemicals around your garden. Oh my goodness, blockchain backer, you really don't have to do that. That's so nice. Thank you so much. I am so happy that the videos have helped you. I also feel a little bit bad that I may have helped contribute a fig cutting collection. I know what that's like to have so many, but it is rewarding. It's wonderful. Can I grow Walla Walla onions in South Central Virginia, Zone 7? I believe Walla Walla onions are a very long day onion. So the answer to that question will be, yeah, sure, they'll grow, but I can't guarantee that you'll get great bulbing. Something like a yellow Granex probably do better for you because they do well in short and intermediate day length zones. You're on the south side of an intermediate day. So I would recommend you grow yellow Granex, but onion seeds are so cheap. That doesn't mean that you can't grow them both. You can experiment and try different varieties and see what does well for you. Laura Larson, can asparagus be transplanted? So when you buy asparagus, what you're actually buying are dormant crowns that somebody grew from seed and then grew them out for 2 or 3 years and then dug them up. So yes, absolutely, asparagus can be transplanted, but you have to do it in the winter when they are completely dormant. So you'll have to dig down very gently and gingerly and find the crowns and make sure that you dig around them and preserve all the roots. Because if you take a shovel and you stick it through the center of the crown, you're going to kill the asparagus plant. So you almost have to be an archaeologist in the sense that you have to dig down like you're looking for dinosaur bones and sweep everything away and find where the actual center of the crown is and then excavate around that crown. And again, they have to be completely dormant. Here in North Carolina, my asparagus is going to start breaking through the ground in a week or two. So here, it's probably too late to dig them up. If you live in a place where they're not going to break through for another month or two, you may be all right. But yes, you can transplant asparagus. You just need to do it when they are dormant. John McCarty, what kind of engineer are you? My degree is in electrical engineering, but I work in the civil transportation space. I design fiber optic backbones and other communications infrastructure along highways and interstates for various DOTs. So I draw straight lines for a living, except when they have to turn. It's not exactly exciting. There is a very long Nordic name up there. First initial J, last name Magyar rule. I'm not even going to try any further than that. How do I get rid of wasps around a fig tree? So I'm guessing you're having an issue with paper wasps, which love eating ripe fig fruit. the best thing that you can do, and really the only thing that works, is to cover them in insect netting, or you get yourself organza bags, and then which are those little party favor bags that they give out at weddings that hold the rice. You take them and you bag each individual fruit. So the only thing that really works is to protect the trees. Insect netting is the best thing if you can do it. Lake Toscana Country Garden. What's the latest update on your fig cross experiment? Back in August or September of last year, I posted a video where I showed you all the different figs that I successfully bred. I was able to fruit 10 of them. So I think 1/3 of them, or 1/4 or 1/3 of them, have fruited by now. It's been incredibly successful. And I showed you all the different fruits in that video. So I would just refer you to check out that video from last August or September where I break it all down for you, because right now all my trees are just dormant looking dead sticks. So they're not really going to do much for a few more weeks. Ed Miller, with all your figs, how do you keep all the birds away? I haven't really, I cover my fig trees. Okay, so I do a few things. I bag the fruits with organza bags. Where I can, I drape insect netting over the trees. And then if you've watched my videos, you'll see that I've built a shade tunnel over a lot of my trees, which is like a big shade tarp netting mesh thing. So really the birds can't get to them. But I don't have a lot of issues with birds in my area because we get so much rain in the summer. And birds usually peck fruits in order to drink the water, not to actually eat them. So people with dry summers that don't get a lot of rain actually have the most issues with their fruits and birds because they're thirsty. So if you give them bird baths around the yard, and then you also set up bird feeders, they have no real need to destroy your fruit because they'll have a clean water source and higher calorie nuts and seeds. So why eat your fruit if they have clean water and they have higher calorie density food? And you can stop a lot of that. J18, have you considered writing a book on growing figs? Cheers from Belize. I've considered writing a book. I just don't have the time because this takes me 40 hours a week. I work a full-time engineering job and I still have to care for the garden. So this is a 100-hour commitment for me every week. One day I hope that I will be lucky enough where I can do this and only this. And when that comes, I would like to dedicate additional time to possibly having a book, a blog, things like that, and add more value to the ecosystem. Also, I've been to Belize. Awesome country, beautiful. We went to Key Calker years ago. We did. I'm having a brain fart. We went to Holchan, which was possibly the most beautiful reef I've ever seen, and we snorkeled that. Just awesome. And we also went to the mainland and looked at some Mayan ruins. Beautiful country. Okay, Joyful Paradise. I live in 9B. Should I top my bell pepper plants? I have never pruned my bell peppers or any of my peppers except when they get so beaten down come July, late July, early August that they start to die back. Sometimes we've had such bad summers that they start to kill my peppers back. So if I prune them after they get sad and tired and then give them fertilizer, a lot of times that will rejuvenate them and they'll come back. But I've never pruned a pepper plant before when they're young or in the spring. I just let them do their thing. So I couldn't tell you either way on pruning peppers, like to get more fruit or anything like that. You'd have to run that experiment yourself. Atlanta Gardener, hello from cold Wilmington. It has been a miserable few days. It's like back to mid-January. Keeping up with the Cononchucks. Do you think now is a good time to uncover banana plants for spring? I don't know. It depends where you live. You do not uncover your bananas until you are after your last chance of frost. If you have not passed your last frost date, do not uncover them. There's no reason to. Bananas aren't going to grow until it's above 60 degrees anyway. They go dormant underneath 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So there is no reason to uncover them unless it's warm out. Tron lives. When and how do you wake up overwintered pepper plants? You just have to be patient. They're not going to do anything until they get enough light and enough warmth. So basically, until you bring them outside and it's nice and warm out, and they get at least 6 hours of direct sun, they're not going to do anything. So don't rush them until it's good and warm out, and make sure you give them some fertilizer. Giving them a water-soluble fertilizer that has a good amount of nitrogen can help wake them up. But again, don't do that if it's still cold and your last frost date isn't going to be, until April 15th or May 1st or something. There's no reason to rush the process. Robbie Miller, thank you so much for the contribution. I really, really appreciate it. I just live north of Houston and would like to try planting green cuttings in late summer. What should I do different than what I normally do in the winter? When you say green cuttings, does that mean of a fig or something else? I've never really had any success with green fig cuttings. I was able to root partially lignified green growth that was green tinted, but I had to do it indoors in pots, and I took gallon storage bags and I draped them over the pots to create a humidity dome. From what I've seen, to have any luck with anything green, they need humidity. With lignified dormant cuttings, they don't necessarily need humidity, but with green, I definitely think you're going to have to create a humidity chamber for that. James Shurry, any advice for engineering students? I have really mixed feelings on getting into engineering right now, because I'm of the mind that I'm genuinely concerned about AI taking a lot of engineering jobs, because most of what we do in engineering, at least the company that I work for, is drafting. We develop plans. Well, what happens when the day comes where you can type into an AI prompt to build me a bridge, and human engineers take a year to do that, and they cost $1 million, and then AI generates it in 30 seconds, and they're perfect calculations without human error. So I really don't know. It's a concern that I have. We don't know what the future holds. So there's some risk to it right now. So I'm almost, if I had a kid, I would almost want to consider pushing them into some sort of trade that AI can't take. And one thing that AI will never be able to take, at least in our lifetime, paving roads, actually building the bridges, building the homes, fixing your plumbing, electricians. I really honestly think these days it's a more secure job to be an electrician than an electrical engineer, because a computer can take your engineering job, but a computer is not going to show up and fix your house when your AC unit goes down. So just something to consider. If you do want to get into engineering, think about the whole AI thing. So I don't know. I don't like AI. Well, Nita Babcock, I don't like the idea of it either, but the truth is, I mean, the old reference is 100 years ago, they said the automobile was going to kill off the stagecoach industry, and it did. And it killed that industry. It put all those people out of work. But think about all of the jobs that have surrounded roads and automobiles. So it was short-term pain for a generation, but it created literally hundreds of millions, maybe billions of jobs around the world. And we wouldn't have any of these things that we have today without the automobile. So I would say to AI, it will put people out of work. But 50 years from now, there may be billions of additional jobs in markets that don't exist today. So it's hard. I try to be optimistic about these things. But right now, there's a lot of risk for us working, especially people around my age that are like right in the middle of their career, where it's hard for us to pivot, but we're nowhere near retirement. So it's a lot to think of. Oh my goodness. Thank you all so much for the funding contributions. I appreciate it so much. August Rain, do you recommend growing onions from seed or from sets? I made a video on this about 3 years ago where I compared the two, and since then I have not planted an onion set. Seed growing onions, in my opinion, are so much better. And the reason why is what onion sets actually are people plant the onion seeds into the ground, and then once they begin to bulb and they get to be about an inch in diameter, they dig them up, they clip the tops off, and then they store them in a cool, dry place, and then they go dormant, and then they sell them to you, and then you plant them. And the problem is some onions are biennials. So sometimes when you stop their growth process in the middle of it, they don't know what year they're picking up on when you replant them. Do they recognize that they're still little babies and they recommit to bulbing, or do they just flower and go to seed on you? And I have not had good success with onion sets. They always wind up being small and they go to seed on me. But when you grow them from seed, they never get confused, and they always know they're in year one of their biennial cycle. And I've gotten so much better bulbing. The problem is it's starting to get late to start onions from seed. So here in North Carolina, I start my onions from seed around Christmas to New Year's. So if you're well north of me, you can probably still start your onion seeds, but you really need to get a move on. Nikki Angels, thank you so much for the contribution. I really appreciate it. Love the videos. So excited about my cukes. How did you make out with early prints? So I had trouble evaluating early prints because I think it was a Ganesha variety that was not parthenocarpic. So it got some pollination, but the plant actually got hit by cucumber beetles, and I only got a few fruits off of it. And I didn't really get to evaluate it very well. So because it's not parthenocarpic, and I'm growing almost all parthenocarpic varieties right now that don't require pollination, I would not grow it again. Not that there was anything wrong with the cucumbers, I just don't want to grow a cucumber that requires pollination when there are so many incredible varieties that don't. Laura Story, thank you so much for the contribution. I appreciate it so, so much. Tron Lives, thank you so much for the contribution. 5.9 last frost. I'll make sure I have Alaska fish fertilizer for pepper plants. Also, our strawberry seedlings supposed to be really very small. Do you mean bare roots? If you mean bare roots, it's going to be dependent on who you buy them from. I don't buy bare roots from the store because they've never been very nice, and they sit on the shelf and you have a high probability of them being dead. I would recommend you buy your bare roots from Handpicked Nursery. He's a local veteran-owned company that's about 2 hours northwest of me in Benson, just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. All of my asparagus and all of my strawberries are from him. The crowns are of absolutely incredible quality. They're like 3 times the size of what you get in the grocery store or the big box store. You can go to his website, Handpicked Nursery, or you can order them through my Amazon store. I specifically listed under the live plants and bare root section in my Amazon store. He sells through Amazon as well if you want to get free Prime shipping. So whatever you do, I strongly recommend him. Everything I've gotten from him has been incredible. And I love supporting veteran-owned companies. That's a personal bias of mine because those people are better people than me, and they deserve our support. Max George, tips for multiple figs in one container. My biggest tip, don't do that. Figs are the most vigorous plant of anything that I grow, sans maybe bananas. The only thing that rivals figs in their vigor is bananas. So I would say absolutely don't do that. Buy another container. Don't do that to your trees. Give them as much room as you possibly can. I like 15-gallon containers for figs. I wouldn't go any smaller than that. Branch vine, can you use a red light therapy like to start seedlings? I have absolutely no idea, but the red light spectrum is used for flowering and fruiting. The blue light spectrum is used for growth and vigor. So I would say probably not a good idea, unless the red lights are just, incandescent lights that are painted red and they're not legitimately the red spectrum, something like that. Emkin, why are ads turned on? Because you don't have a choice. Even if I didn't monetize the live stream, YouTube would still run ads. So the way it works with YouTube is if I monetize the live stream or any of my videos, I get a cut of it. If I don't monetize it or if I don't put on ads and I make absolutely nothing, YouTube still runs ads. So may as well at least get a share of it. How do you grow indoors? I only grow seedlings indoors, and to use that, I use basic LED grow lights that you can get on Amazon for $40, $50. If you want to grow things to maturity indoors, where they're actually going to flower, fruit, bear fruit, and take them to maturity, you need to get a really strong grow light setup. You need to get lights that are several $100s to have the intensity to grow things to maturity, because the difference between a 4 to 6 inch seedling and then the light requirements for something that's 4 or 5 feet tall and flowers and fruits, it's an order of magnitude more. Julio Tamu, if overwintering tomatoes, can you do determinate as well as indeterminate? Well, determinate tomatoes, after they flower and fruit and ripen their fruit, they die back. So you wouldn't want to do that for a determinate because unless you started a seedling in late fall and then just grew it throughout the winter and it grew very, very slowly, just puttering along. You could do that, but like digging up a determinate tomato that you grew in the summer and trying to overwinter it, don't do that. You can theoretically do that with an indeterminate tomato, but I would strongly recommend against it because you're not going to be able to support a plant that size, and unless you're buying really expensive grow lights that have a ton of intensity, it's not going to flower and fruit for you. You're just going to be throwing money out the window with all that electricity for very few tomatoes. It doesn't make sense to me. You can do it with a pepper because they're really small. If you want to grow a tomato indoors, I recommend you grow something like a micro tom or a tiny tim, which produce cherry-sized tomatoes on a plant that's only about a foot tall. You can grow them under basic grow lights. So that's what I would recommend. The Teenage Gardener, can you graft an indeterminate scion tomato to a determinate rootstock tomato? Yes. In fact, right now I'm growing eggplant and some indeterminate tomatoes. I'm going to try to graft a tomato onto an eggplant rootstock because I have some African eggplants that are like bulletproof and completely nematode proof. They're absolutely absurd. So I'm going to try to graft some indeterminate tomatoes onto an eggplant rootstock and see how that goes. So you can even do that. It'll be a little tougher, but you can do it. Aaron Palin, how long do you run your grow lights for tomatoes? 16 hours on, 8 hours off. 16 on, 8 off is what you generally want. Dina Natalongi, can we propagate from fruit cuttings? Depends on the cutting. Something like a fig will root easily. Something like a citrus may be able to root. Something like a pawpaw does not root. I don't think persimmons root. Avocados do not root. The only way you can propagate those is by growing out rootstock and then grafting them onto rootstock. Now, you can always propagate any cutting by grafting if you have the rootstock ready to go. So 100% of the time, you can propagate with grafting if you're good at that. What beer are you drinking tonight? Tonight is Sapporo. I love this stuff. It's expensive, but I think it's really good. But the thing about it is, it's only good to me if it's cold out. I wouldn't want to drink it in July because it's a little darker, but in the wintertime, when you're cold, it's really good. Brenda Lane, is that 8 hours off after germination? It's 8 hours, it's 16 hours on, 8 hours off, regardless. So while they're germinating and after they germinate, 16 hours on, 8 hours off. Off topic, do you like anime? When I was in sixth, seventh, eighth grade, I liked Dragon Ball Z, but I don't think I haven't watched anything like that since. Um, that's all I could tell you. That's the only anime show I ever watched, and that was 25 years ago. When we just got Cartoon Network as a channel, and they just started making the dubs, and that's when I watched it. A. Patterson, thank you so much for the contribution. I appreciate it so much. I have to grow in containers. Should I move a new young tree straight into its full-size container or uppot it gradually over several years? That would depend on what you're growing. Something like a fig tree, you can go straight into a big container. Something like a citrus tree, they like gradual uppotting. Um, so other than those two, I don't really know if it matters. If you want to go with a 15-gallon pot, then I don't see why you couldn't go from a smaller, like a tree pot, right into a 15-gallon pot. I think you'd be totally fine with that. John Gidry, can you spray for caterpillars? Yeah, there are two things that work really well for caterpillars. There's BT concentrate and there is spinosad concentrate. Both are natural, both are organic. It's effectively a natural bacteria that the caterpillars have to eat. So it has to be ingested by the caterpillars, and it disrupts their digestive system, and it'll kill them in about 1 to 2 days. Now, BT kills exclusively caterpillars. So you can spray that with reckless abandon, and it's not going to hurt your bees. It's not going to hurt your wasps. It's not going to hurt your ladybugs. It only hurts worms and caterpillars. It will kill things like butterfly caterpillars. So keep that in mind. But it basically has very, very low fallout. Your spinosad has a much higher range of toxicity. It will kill beetles, it will kill thrips, it'll kill aphids, it'll also kill good bugs if they gnaw and digest the leaves that it's sprayed on, but it's not a contact killer. So for that reason, it's generally considered low toxicity for bees and ladybugs and things like that, since they don't chew on the leaves. That being said, regardless, if you're going to use spinosad, spray it. No matter what you do, always spray at night after the sun goes down, because when you spray during the day and the sun is out, it risks burning leaves as it reacts with the sun. And also, your beneficial insects are generally diurnal. They're out and active when the sun is out. So usually only bad bugs are out at night. So if you wait until the sun sets, you can usually spray things and have very low fallout of beneficials. Anthony D, how often should I use fish emulsion? That depends on what you're growing. For a container garden, I would recommend, generally speaking, twice a month, so once every 2 weeks, because your plants are restricted to the nutrients that they get inside that container. So anytime you overwater, you're going to flush it out. Every time it rains, it flushes out the nutrients, and the trees can only get what you put in that container, so they exhaust the nutrients really quickly. So you need to do it at a higher frequency. For rapid feeding annuals, like tomatoes or watermelons that demand a ton of nutrients, again, I would do that twice a month, every 2 weeks. So on that same schedule. But for something like your fruit trees that are in ground, I wouldn't waste your money. For your in-ground trees, I recommend you focus on building soil and you don't use expensive water-soluble fertilizers on them, except maybe at planting or that first year if you're trying to push them along a little bit harder to get them established more quickly. But after year one, I would never put water-soluble fertilizers on an in-ground tree. It's just too expensive. Gangars, any updates on your Florida project? I mean, I'm not going to be down in Florida for a very long time, at least until 2030. I don't have the money to do it, and my parents live here. My wife's parents live here. So our family's here. We're in no rush. We like where we live. So I'd rather enjoy the time that we have with both of our families here. Everything's going great for the most part, and I'm going to save up what I can, and then hopefully early 2030s, I will be able to head down there. I'm basically looking at my biological clock where I'm going to be in my 40s and mid 40s. I'm going to have to do this labor while I'm in my 40s and get everything going. So it's not going to be too long, but I do need some time. Sephiroth T, favorite sugar type fig and why? I don't really grow any sugar figs because I kind of find them bland, except for Celeste. Celeste is the only sugar fig that I really grow, and honestly, I hate the tree because to this day it drops 75% of its crop. I don't know why it's so finicky. Maybe it just doesn't like where it's planted. I don't understand. But I usually like the very stronger, dark, resiny figs and the strawberry fig. So I like Smith. I like Italian 258. I like Colonel Littman's. I like Col de Dame Blanc. I like Del San Juan Migrant, White Madeira #1. I like those types of figs. Thanks for the tip on BT. Put it in my cart. Ah, awesome. Yeah, BT is good, and it's pretty affordable too, and a little bit goes a long way. So you shouldn't have to use it more than twice a month. Gilbert Velasquez, does diatomaceous earth harm lizards? I have no idea. I don't use diatomaceous earth because it's only active when, it only works when it's dry. And I get all my insect pressure in the summer and we get too much rain, so it just washes away. So I did buy some, I tried using it and I never had any luck with it because when it's dry here, I don't really have the pests. And when it's wet here, it doesn't. Polly LaFoy, can I grow straight neck squash and crookneck on a trellis? Yeah, you can grow anything you can grow any vining crop you want on a trellis, provided it is strong enough to support the weight of the squashes. So yeah, I don't see why not. I will be growing some on a cattle panel trellis. Mary Grow With Me, have you ever tasted a Jolly Rancher fig? No, I have actually never heard of a Jolly Rancher fig. Lindy Smallwood, is it okay to put oak leaves in your garden beds? Yeah, oak leaves make absolutely fantabulous mulch. So if you really want to make oak leaves even better, run them over with a lawnmower and collect them in a bag and then dump the shredded leaves and use them as mulch. That's some of the best mulch on earth for your garden. Does BT treat root knot nematodes as well? I have no idea. I don't know if root knot nematodes are taxonomically speaking a worm, or at least a worm or a caterpillar in the sense that we typically think they are. So I'm going to have to label that, and I don't know. NC is horrible for insect control because of all the rain. It's funny because people from Florida say, you don't understand the rainy season we have here. I get more rain than anywhere in Florida except for the immediate panhandle. It is rough here. 60, 70 inches of rain a year. Oof. Florida entrepreneur, have you ever grown passion fruit? No, I have not. But what I've seen, it's supposedly one of the easiest things on earth to grow. You just need a ton of space. So please, if you are growing passion fruit, make sure you have lots of space to grow it and make sure you have a really strong trellis because apparently a couple of passion fruit vines can take over 50 feet in a matter of a year. So be careful with that. My snap peas grow to about a foot tall and die. Any thoughts? I would guess you are either not giving them enough irrigation and they're drying up. They have very shallow roots and they don't do well in drought. or you're planting them too early and they're getting wiped out by frost or freeze. Now, I would think that's probably not an issue, because if they got wiped out by freeze, that would be pretty obvious. So my guess is you're probably not watering them well enough, or they're not growing in enough organic matter. Kimberly Merida, does coffee grounds help as fertilizer? Coffee grounds are a fantastic addition to make compost. So if you have a compost pile, a composting trash can, if you like burying kitchen scraps in your garden soil, if you like dumping kitchen scraps around on top of your garden soil and you let them decompose over the winter, coffee grounds, amazing for all of those things. I would not necessarily dump them raw around plants. You could do a little bit, but I wouldn't do too much uncomposted right around where plants are actively growing. Robert Moore, when do I prune lime and lemon trees in 15-gallon pots? Immediately after you harvest. You want to pick the fruit off, and then when you pick the fruit off, that is when you prune, because you want to prune immediately after harvest to give the tree as much time to recover and put on new growth for the next blooming cycle. Most of us harvest our citrus right about now, in December, January, and February. So generally, we are going to prune our citrus in February and March, and then they flower and bloom again in late April, May. What berries do you find easiest to grow in containers? From Ironically Fit. I don't grow any berries in containers because they all grow like weeds in ground, and they're all naturally very small and dwarfing plants. So in my opinion, it's a lot of effort to maintain a container garden. It basically confines you to your house, because if they dry out, everything dies. So I only put my really high value stuff that I don't have room for in ground in containers, because blackberries, raspberries, blueberries, they take up such little space. I recommend planting them. You can even plant them around your house foundation. They're great foundation plantings if you have limited space. So I would recommend you don't grow berries in containers. But if you must, because you really don't have the space, or you just want to do it, or you're renting and you can't plant things in ground, anything will grow well in containers if you give it enough fertilizer, sunshine, and irrigation. So blueberries will do fine. Erect type blackberries will do fine. I recommend growing erect type, not spreading type, because they'll grow more tree-like. Strawberries grow really well in containers. Raspberries may be a little bit tougher because they're so bushy, but I still think you can do it. Is it still too soon to fertilize my northern highbush blueberries? From Sweet. So I don't know where you live, but I've already fertilized my blueberries here in North Carolina. You usually want to fertilize your deciduous fruit trees and bushes 30 to 45 days before your last frost date, because if you're using an organic fertilizer, because they take several weeks to break down. If you are going to use a water-soluble fertilizer like a Jax 20-20-20 or a Miracle Grow or something like that, or even fish emulsion, don't do that until they fully break dormancy, because they take hold immediately. So there's no point in dumping a water-soluble fertilizer on a dormant tree. You're just wasting your money. Or even worse, you can get it out of dormancy maybe a little bit earlier and get hit by a late frost and then lose your crop. Merciless Melody, you should set up a bed in the corner for Dale. Come on. Well, you can't really see it, but that's Dale's bed right back there. Dale has an upstairs bed. He has a couch bed. He has an outdoor bed. He has a kennel bed and a very, very large wooden bed in the living room. So he has, I think, 5 beds. I have 1 bed, so it's good to be a Dale. Kimberly Merida, what is your favorite persimmon? Easiest question anybody could ever ask me. The Giambo persimmon is not only my favorite persimmon, I think it is the greatest fruit tree. It is the greatest fruit I've ever had, and that includes figs. I have never ever in my life tasted anything right off of the tree as good as a Giambo persimmon. Now, legend has it that some people say that about mangoes. I have never had a mango straight off the tree, so I couldn't tell you how that rivals a Giambo persimmon. But in my entire yard, nothing comes close to a Giambo persimmon. Greatest thing I've ever had. When is the latest date to plant corn? Depends on the variety you're growing, but I would say probably absolute latest 90 days before your last frost. 90 days before your first frost in the fall. Anthony D, how often should I use Miracle-Gro? In a container garden, if you're going to use a water-soluble fertilizer, once, let me start that again. In a container garden, if you're going to use a water-soluble fertilizer, you want to use it twice a month, or every other week, same thing. For something like an in-ground fruit tree, never. For an in-ground garden, depends what you're growing. If you're really trying to push, if you're growing corn, you kind of have to give them water solubles. If you're growing like the super sweet varieties, they don't grow well organically. So that would be every 10 days, probably. Corn's insanely heavy of a feeder. If you're really trying to push your tomatoes hard, twice a month. Generally speaking, any kind of water-soluble fertilizer, you don't want to use it more than 2 to 3 times a month tops. Otherwise, you're kind of abusing it. You don't want all those salts accumulating in your soil. If you can use it, never. I mean, that's a great thing too. If you can use other things that are a little bit better, that's great. Caleb Smith, what are your recommendations for raspberry bushes? Because I've heard they take over your yard. My raspberry hasn't really spread all that much. Try to look for more erect varieties that are not known to spread. Other than that, you should be able to control it through pruning. My grandfather had a raspberry bush growing for 25 years. I don't think that thing ever really spread more than maybe 6 to 8 feet. I mean, it's not like bamboo. So if you can stick it in a corner and control its growth and prune it regularly, it shouldn't be that out of control. And worst comes to worst, if it really spreads that much, you could always take a shovel during the dormant season and just dig some of it out. Noel76, my trash can composter has ants in it. Is this a problem? I mean, possibly, especially if they're fire ants. You definitely would maybe want to treat that if that is if they're fire ants. That Amdro ant bait, you can put literally half a teaspoon by one of the holes, and they'll take that in, and that should eradicate the entire colony. I know it's not really ideal to put a chemical like that in your compost, but if it's a severe problem, I don't really know what choice you have. Another thing you can do is, if you're very concerned, you can Google a recipe to make a borax sugar solution if you don't want to use a chemical. Borax and sugar will kill the ant colony, and that's probably I wouldn't say it's organic, but it's a little bit of a safer thing. You could also get those sugar ant traps that have the pre-made borax sugar solution that is safe to use indoors, and you can put one of those little bait traps outside of the trash can composter, and that should take care of it. Carol, best fertilizers to get when limited in funds. That would be the biggest bag of fertilizer that you can get, because you can get fertilizer for about $1 a pound in bulk. It will cost you more money up front because you're buying more fertilizer. So I was just in Costco today, and Costco is selling 25-pound bags of Dr. Earth's 222 for $23, which it's a good price, but it's really weak. A better deal is to go on Amazon and buy the 50-pound bag of Espoma plant tone 533, which usually sells in the $50 to $60 range. So while it is slightly more per pound, it's twice as strong as the 222. So you can actually use a lot less of that fertilizer. So the cheapest fertilizer that I've seen regularly, unless you can score a fall clearance deal where they mark them down insanely so, probably the Espoma Plant Tone 533 on Amazon for $50 to $60 for a 50-pound bag. That'll be enough fertilizer for a very long time for most people, and it'll store for years in a cool, dry place. I have bags that are 3 years old, and it's just fine. So for 50 or 60 bucks, I know it's not a small sum of money, but it's all the fertilizer you may need for years. So that's the cheapest way to get it. Julio Tamu, is 10-10-10 too much for vegetables? So when you tell me 10-10-10, you're telling me that you are buying those plastic balls that are made to be spread on lawns with those spreaders. I would not put them anywhere near a vegetable garden. They're basically lawn fertilizer. I think that stuff is the worst stuff on the market. It's horrible. I would recommend you never buy 10-10-10 ever. Get yourself a good organic 444 or a 555. Yes, it's more money, but you're actually building your soil in the process, and you're going to get better results from over time. If you need a synthesized fertilizer, I would get something like a Jax 20-20-20. If you absolutely have to use a synthesized fertilizer because you're growing corn or something like that, I would get Jax 20-20-20. It's water soluble. You mix it in watering cans. It is a much better quality product. Joanne Gervais, romaine lettuce, better for pots or beds? I mean, anything is going to do better in ground, in a raised bed or an earth garden than a container garden. Container gardens you do out of necessity because you don't have the space, or you're renting, or some other reason. It's always better to grow in ground. So it's going to be better in beds. But that being said, you can happily grow romaine lettuce in containers. My dad loves growing. He grows romaine lettuce in the winter. He has this little alcove in the corner of his house that's kind of like almost like an L, sort of like this, and it completely blocks the wind. And he has some containers that he presses up against that corner because it's like this wicked mild microclimate. And he grows Paris Island romaine lettuce there in big containers all winter long. And it's some of the most beautiful lettuce I've ever seen. He grows better lettuce than I do. So, I mean, that's a strategy. Nikki Angels, grow more 20-20-20-25 pound. That is a perfectly good made in USA substitute for Jax 20-20-20. That's some of the best value water soluble synthesized fertilizer that you can get. Trixie Malone, can citrus trees be potted in ground in North Carolina? I assume you mean planted in ground in North Carolina. Please search my videos. I have more videos on citrus than you can count. I'm growing 9 different varieties of citrus in ground in North Carolina, and all of them thrive. I'm growing satsumas. I'm growing navel oranges. I'm growing Meyer lemons. I'm growing avocados here in ground in North Carolina, and all have been a tremendous success. So the answer is absolutely, unless you live in like Asheville or something, then that you're really going to be pushing it. Anthony D, is bone meal good for everything? Well, bone meal builds strong roots. The phosphorus and calcium component is great for the roots of any plant. So, the short answer to that question is it's good for anything with roots. So I would say yes. But that being said, that doesn't mean dump it on everything, because bone meal is expensive. So if you're growing something like, lettuce or broccoli that have lower phosphorus and calcium demands, you don't need to use a whole bunch of bone meal. You can just dust the planting holes when you transplant things, and that should be enough to get them through the season. A hand up support. Thank you so much for the contribution. I really, really appreciate it. I'm in Durham. Can I grow a dwarf Cavendish banana tree? Yes, in a container. Probably not the answer you wanted to hear. You can grow it in ground, but it's going to be really tough. I'm growing several bananas in ground here in North Carolina. I have videos that show you how to protect them. And the only thing that has done well for me here is dwarf Orinoco. None of my others have ever fruited. So dwarf Orinoco is the only variety that I can really recommend in North Carolina. I haven't tried dwarf Cavendish though. That being said, I don't think I'm going to get any bananas this year. This was the worst winter I've ever had in my entire 8 years living here. So I think this is going to be a banana-less winter, but I've been wrong before. For your other question, what do you think about multi-grafted trees? I have an Asian pear that I grafted myself, 3 varieties on one tree that's doing really well. It flowered last year, but this year I think is going to be the year it actually fruits. So I think it should be fine. You have to be very careful when growing multi-grafted fruit trees because you have to keep them balanced. If you don't keep the individual sides of the trees equal in size, one of them is going to outpace the other, and the other ones are going to get stunted and they're going to die back. So if you're going to grow multi-grafted fruit trees, you have to be very careful that you prune the tree religiously and keep it very well balanced, or else over time you are going to lose some of the varieties. So please keep that in mind. Bits of life. I live in Southport. Do you grow grapes? Yes. There was a grape breeder in the 1800s named T.V. Munson that developed a huge number of incredibly disease-resistant grapes. They are seeded, but I'm growing a variety called Mrs. Munson that is completely bulletproof here. It has 1 to 3 seeds per grape, but they're absolutely delicious. They require no sprays. They're Pierce's disease resistant. They're awesome, and they grow very, very vigorously. So that's a good one if you want a seeded grape. I planted a Mars seedless that is still a baby. It's going to probably leaf out this year. So I'm going to see how that does. It's not Pierce's disease resistance, but it's supposed to be very disease resistant. So it'll be a trial. And of course, lots of muscadines do well here. Muscadines grow wild all over the woods. Go take a walk through Longleaf Park in Wilmington, and they're just growing all over the pine trees there. I have some in my backyard that are growing on the pine trees. Branch vine, do you have an olive tree? Yes, I'm growing a dwarf self-fertile olive called Arbosana. Arbosana, Arbosana. It only gets to be about 10 to 12 feet tall. You can keep it smaller than that with regular pruning. And it's supposed to be cold hardy to about 10 degrees. Mine got a little bit burnt this year in the ice storm, but it should recover because it's only 2 feet tall. So we'll see how it does long term. Judy Amica, Japanese beetles eat cherry tree. How to stop? Well, if it's a small enough tree, the guaranteed way to stop it is to drape it in insect netting. If it is a large tree, I don't think there's any real way to totally stop it. You just have to keep an eye on it, and when you see beetles, you're going to have to spray something like pyrethrin to knock back the population. You may have to spray it every single week if it's a large tree. And you're probably going to have to get like a ULV fogger or something to blow it high enough in the air that you can actually treat it. If it's a big cherry tree, like 20 feet tall, you're not going to be able to spray that with a pump sprayer. So that's going to be really, really hard. It's probably not the answer you want, but cherry trees, there's a reason why it's almost impossible to find organic cherries. They just get everything. They get every disease. They get every pest. They get every bird. So it's just tough. You could also try what James Prigioni does, and you can get yourself surround kaolin clay, and you can try coating the entire tree constantly and maintaining a clay layer on it. It's going to be work, but that will keep the beetles away. It's going to wash off every time it rains hard. So you're going to have to reapply after every heavy rainstorm. Those are the only real pieces of advice I can give you. DM, favorite beer? Depends on my mood. Um, my favorite general beer, if I were to give like an all-around honorable mention, it's going to be Peroni. I could drink a Peroni at any time. Winter, I really like these Sapporos. In the summer, I really like Pacifico. So I would say my three favorites are Peroni, Pacifico, and Sapporo. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a sad day when Tuck died. He and I text on the regular a couple of times a month just to stay in touch, and he told me about it a few days after it happened, and it was just so sad because I think he told me the day before Gotcha, my dog Dale's Gotcha Day. So it was a lot of just, it makes me, think about, mortality and everything like that. It's just, it's a lot of people think it's, you know, it's so unfair because, cats and dogs and these domesticated animals that we love so much, they have such short lives and it's not fair. But I would argue that it's like that for a reason because, we as humans, because we outlive them so many times over, it's incumbent upon us to rescue as many of them as possible. So, I don't even want to think about Dale's demise, but, chances are it's going to, chances are I will outlive him. And if I do, it's going to be the worst time of my life, absolutely bar none. But it will be incumbent upon me to rescue another dog and give that dog the best possible life. And I can honestly tell myself I've given Dale the best life possible. And I'm, you know, if and when that god awful day comes, I hope that I can make another dog very happy one day. Anthony D, you are a good person. Thank you very much. I don't know if I'm that great of a person, but you know, when I die one day and I go and I meet my maker and they say, why should I let you in? Why shouldn't I send you down to the hot place? I want to at least be able to say, at least I gave Dale a really, really good life. That's going to be my bargaining chip. Merciless Melody, have you ever considered keeping bees? No, absolutely not. That's not something I would ever do. Um, just because, so while I really, while I really hope to homestead one day, I do still want to be able to travel, and especially for Brittany's sake, because Brittany loves traveling. It's really important that we do at least one international vacation a year, and I don't want to get to the point where this becomes so all-consuming that I can never leave. And eventually, when I set up this Florida homestead property, I'm going to do things specifically in mind that I will be able to leave for 7 to 10 days and not have to worry about everything dying. So, while I love this and there's nothing more on earth that I want to do than this, I don't want to be a slave to it, if that makes sense. And being a beekeeper, I feel like I just don't want to do it. Samuel Dean, what should I add to my blueberries to make them more acidic other than sulfur? I just made a video about this 3 or 4 days ago, where I explained this exact process. So I would strongly recommend you watch that video. But to give you a quick 30-second answer, aside from the sulfur, um, you can use pine bark as the mulch, which is mildly acidic. And if your soil is not acidic right from the get-go and you're transplanting your blueberries, you can dig a hole 2 to 3 times as deep as the hole that you actually need and backfill it halfway with peat moss. That way, the initial planting, you'll be in acidic peat moss. So consider that when you are planting blueberries. Then over time, you can acidify your soil for the long term with sulfur and pine bark. Roxanne Trixie, who is the cook in your house? Me. I am the cook. I started making homemade ravioli with my grandma when I was 3. So I've been cooking for longer than I've been gardening, and yeah, I cook a lot and a big diversity of stuff. Not one more inch. Thank you so much for the contribution. I appreciate it so much. I got onions from Dixondale 12 days ago. I wasn't able to plant this week due to being below 0 temps, and now it is too wet to plant. What can I do to keep them viable for another day, for another 7 days? I don't, I've never been put in this position because I always seed grow my onions, so they're in seed trays, so I can hold them there as long as I want. So I don't want to give you bad information, and I honestly do not know the answer to that question. Yeah, I really wish I could. I mean, what's to stop you from temporarily planting them in individual, like, I hesitate to say this, but what's to stop you from getting a 72 cell seed tray and filling it with potting mix and literally just planting them all in the individual 72 cell seed trays? Like what's to stop you from just getting a whole bunch of these and planting them all in these, and then just getting them started and letting them grow in these for the next 2 weeks until they root, and then pulling them all out later and just installing them as plugs into your garden? Yeah, you'll have to buy potting mix, but this is like a guaranteed way that you know that it'll work. It's the only way I'm sure your onions won't die on you, since you can just get them started in these and then transplant them out later. So if you don't mind the additional step, that should work. Roxanne, Trixie, how do you keep birds from your fruit? I did address this a little bit earlier. I think because I live in Wilmington, and we get so much rain in the summer, I don't have a huge problem with birds because birds peck your fruit primarily for water, not as a food source. So the best thing you can do is to drape everything in bird netting or insect netting. That's the best way to do it. The second best way is to bag the individual fruits with green organza bags because that masks them. But you're going to need hundreds of organza bags to probably do that, and a lot of time. Another trick is to install bird baths and keep them full of clean water throughout your yard, because they have less of a reason to peck the fruit if you give them a clean source of reliable drinking water. And finally, give them a bird feeder, 20, 30 feet away from your garden. That way they have a high calorie source of nuts and seeds instead of low calorie watery fruits. So if you cover everything and you give them an alternative source of food and water, they should leave most of your stuff alone. Samuel Dean, what is your opinion of epic gardening or botanical interests? I've never met Kevin. I've never talked to him, so I couldn't tell you either which way. I can tell you that I have watched some of his homesteading videos, because I'm very interested in homesteading. So believe it or not, I watch a lot of gardening videos myself when I have free time, which isn't very often, but I mean, I enjoy his videos. Botanical interests, if you're talking about the seed company, I buy a ton of botanical interest seeds because there's a local store where I live called Farmer's Supply. They sell botanical interest seeds for a good price, and they have a nice selection, so I get them there all the time. They've always been fantabulous. Any suggestions for keeping stray cats out of my garden? Merciless Melody. Yeah, you have to install a fence. It's the only surefire way to keep them out. I consider a fence as important to the garden as the soil and the plants themselves. So I would never grow a garden without a fence. I think it's mandatory. I know a lot of people can't or won't install them, but it's really the only way. Kevin bought botanical interests in 2022? Is that really? I don't know anything about that. I'd have to look into that. I've never heard that. Hmm. Sandy Izzard, thank you so much for the contribution. I really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Blazorg, any recommendations for eggplant? This is my first year growing eggplant. Thanks. So I'm not the biggest eggplant eater, but I don't personally like the fat eggplants. I find them too seedy and too spongy. So many years ago, I started growing the Japanese eggplants, which are very long and skinny, and they have a lot less seeds. So for the last 4 years, I have been growing. 4 years ago, I bought a pack of Japanese eggplants from tomato growers called Orient Express. Orient Express. And I've been growing them every single year. And every year they germinate for me. And they're my favorite eggplant to date. Now, admittedly, I only grow 3 eggplant plants a year. But these are the only eggplant that I really like. So if you're an eggplant lover, maybe my opinion's not very good because I'm not an eggplant lover. But if you're hit or miss on eggplant, they're by far my favorite. Joe Golden, can you start seeds in compost only? Yes, but you're going to have a higher risk of getting all sorts of diseases. So I would not start my seeds in compost, especially indoors, because you risk bringing in all sorts of fungus gnats and other insects that are going to hatch, and there's going to be no predator insects to keep them in check, no cool nights to keep them slow. They'll just explode, and you'll have a big mess in on your house. So I would not do that. Kevin Slater, what NPK do you use on your blueberries? When you buy organic fertilizer, your NPK is always going to be 555, 444, 533, 434. They're always going to be under 6 and really close together. So the best to use is whatever's on sale, whatever you can get for the best price per pound. So I don't care if you use a 444, a 555, a 533, it's all good. But I would recommend that no matter what fertilizer you do use, you dust them with a little bit of bone meal every single year, because the bone meal with its phosphorus component will help the fruiting cycle. But you have to do that early in the year, like now, because it takes a long time to break down and blueberries flower very early. So make sure if you're going to use bone meal, you dust them right now. Make sure you fertilize your blueberries right now, because the organic fertilizers take a long time to break down and really feed the plants. So mine are already flowering, so get a move on. A. Patterson, that is the African eggplant I grew last year, and Soro Owea. It is, I've never, it's a freak show of a plant. I had just to rip the plant up. I had to basically wait for it to get hit by a freeze and then wait a month for the roots to start to decompose, because the roots of this thing, it was like ripping a tree out. So I can say, if you have root knot nematodes, grow this thing. This thing is a freak, and make sure you give it space, because this is the kind of plant that can crowd out other plants. It's so incredibly vigorous. Coastal distancing, container soil question. Once you have a tomato blight or other issues, can you reuse the soil? The question I would answer, the question I would follow that up with is when? Right away, absolutely not, because your new seedlings will probably just get infected with it again. Now, if you take that soil and you leave it outside all winter with plastic sheeting over it, so you're solarizing the soil and the sun is beating on it all winter long, then you may be able to use it. But ideally, you would rotate the soil every other year. Now, for me here in North Carolina, every single tomato plant I have, no matter what I do, is going to have blight on it by June. It's completely unavoidable. So, I mean, blight is in the air. It's not just in the soil. It's not just a soil-borne disease. It's in the air. So no matter what you do, you're probably eventually going to get early blight. So you can keep early blight in check by spraying hydrogen peroxide spray on your plants every week, or by treating it with like an organic liquid copper fungicide or something like that, and you can still get a good harvest. I've also found that you get a lot less blight if you keep your tomato plants in shade. They produce way better, and it helps slow disease spread. So those are some tips I would give you. Wyatt Schaefer, do you like ground cherries? Actually, yes, I do. Aunt Molly's ground cherry is delicious. It tastes like pineapples and vanilla. It's fantastic. The problem with ground cherries is, though, they drop their crop everywhere, and wherever you plant it, you're going to have ground cherries coming up everywhere for years. So if you do grow ground cherries, I recommend you grow it in a container, because anywhere you plant it in your garden is going to be a ground cherry bed for the next rest of your life. What is your preferred size garden bed? So length for garden beds do not matter. You can make them any length you want. It's the width that is the problem. 48 inches wide is the absolute maximum, because a human being can only reach in about 2 feet. In fact, mine are all 48 inches wide. If I could do it all over again, I would make mine probably more like 42 inches wide. I would make it more like 3.5 feet than 4 feet wide, because it's really hard to reach in the center of my raised beds. It's so 48 inches is the absolute maximum if you have long arms. If you're a shorter person, go more like 3.5 feet wide. Sidhu, can you grow mulberries in your area? Yes, but I have never planted any because they tend to be a very messy tree, and they take up a lot of space. So when I eventually move to Florida, I will plant a mulberry tree, because they grow fantastically well in Florida, and they're one of the earliest things you can plant. So they're a great way to get fresh fruit in Florida in like March. So that will be a must, but I will plant it in a corner somewhere where I don't care that it drops everywhere and makes a nasty, ugly mess. Cam P, where should I buy the Giambo persimmon? So my Giambo persimmon is from Just Fruits and Exotics. I also bought one for my neighbor from Plant Me Green. Any of those will be fine, but there are tons of other great nurseries out there. You can get them, I think, from Edible Landscaping, from One Green World. Basically, wherever you can get the best deal is where I would recommend you get yourself a Giambo persimmon. Frog Rogers, how's your Mrs. Munson grape doing? It's a great grape. I already pruned mine. It looks beautiful. There's just something about a freshly pruned grape that just, it looks so Mediterranean and just Italian awesome. And I have a feeling mine is going to start leafing out within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Right now it's dead as a doornail looking, but it's going to look great in a few weeks. Vivian Lee, how's your Olympic giant pear tree doing? Olympic giant. Do you mean Korean giant? I only have one Asian pear, but it's a multi-grafted tree, and it has Chojuro, Hosui, and Korean giant on it. And none of them have fruited for me yet, although they did flower last year, and I got one Chojuro pear that dropped off in the middle of the season. I think this year maybe I'll be able to get my first fruit, but it's taken a while for the tree to get growing because it's only like 2.5 years old. So I think this is going to be the year of vigor. Maybe I'll get a couple of fruits, and next year I think will be the year of the actual harvest. Branch vine, any tips on growing sugarcane? No, none. I have zero experience with it, and I wouldn't want to misrepresent and give advice on something I don't know anything about. Do you grow watermelons? What is your favorite variety? I do grow watermelons, but they're one of the things that I haven't had a tremendous amount of success with yet. I'm still looking for one that I really enjoy. We get so much rain here, it's just a problem. And watermelons really they like water initially, but then when they ripen in June and July, they really like heat and drought. And we just don't get that here. So they've been challenging. Out of the ones that I've grown, the best one I probably had is called Lilanu Sweet Glow, which is an orange watermelon. But I'm still searching for one that I truly love. GD3 Design. Yes, I grew Legend last year, and I didn't have great success. Maybe I started them too late. See, I bought into the idea that Legend was a more disease-resistant variety than Selects, and that is just not true. As far as I can see, it is just as fragile as Selects. So I planted it out with my other determinants, thinking it was going to do okay, and it did not. So for that reason, I didn't have a tremendous amount of success with it. But this year, I'm just growing Selects again. I already have several of them growing in my office. I'm going to put them out in containers early. And yeah. Dale, do you want a treat? Dale. Dale. Come here, buddy. I have a biscuit. Do you want a treat? I wanted to try to get Dale to make an appearance, but he's sound asleep on the couch downstairs. How to stop vine borers? Good question. Haven't found a solution to that yet, other than covering your plants in insect netting, and then you have to manually hand pollinate because none of the bees get to them. So that's the only real way to stop them. Cover your plants and then hand pollinate. Trixie Malone, why will my mature fruit trees not flower? Are you pruning them? Because a lot of trees won't do very well if you don't prune them. So I would strongly recommend you're doing proper annual pruning, and then you make sure that you are giving your trees everything they need in terms of composting and mulching. That would be my guess. Yes, pruning. Okay. So are you pruning them correctly? Because some fruit trees make their fruit on the New Year's growth, some fruit trees make their fruit on the previous year's growth, and some fruit trees make the fruit on spurs. Like apples and pears make fruit trees make fruit on spurs that are several years old, and they will continue to fruit for 1 to 2 decades. So if you are pruning your apple and pear trees back hard every single year, you're removing the spurs and you're not going to get any fruit. So make sure you're not pruning off any fruit spurs. Also, many fruit trees actually fruit on the previous year's wood. So you have to really closely analyze what species of fruit tree you're growing and what year wood the tree fruits on. Because if you are pruning, you may actually be pruning off the wood that they need to fruit. Branch vine. Can I grow vining tomatoes 6 inches apart in a large pot growing on a trellis? I mean, you can, sure. Will they be really productive? I don't know. It depends on the variety you're growing. It depends on how you train and prune them. It depends on how much sun they're getting. It depends on how much fertilizer you're giving them. Can you? Absolutely. Will they do as well as if you grow them with 18-inch spacing? I don't know. It depends on your culture and how you raise them. Is 2020 Jax only good for corn? No, it's literally good for everything that is a flowering or fruiting or vegetative growth plant. It's a balanced fertilizer. So, I mean, anything will do fine with a 2020. You just have to understand that, flooding your plants with a lot of really potent water-soluble fertilizer is not necessarily a good thing. And it's not exactly beneficial to the soil. So I use Jax 20, but I only do it to give my container garden, because the container gardens are limited to whatever nutrients are in that container. So they're a lot more restricted. And I only use it to maybe push some things like tomatoes a little harder. Or pepper plants when they die back here in July if I need them to resprout and give them a boost. So I'm strategic with it. I don't fertilize my plants as the core fertilizing process with something like a Jack's 20-20-20. My core fertilizers are compost, fish fertilizer, and a granular organic. And then I only add 20-20-20 when I really want something specific out of my plants. Mark Oliver, what fertilizer wouldn't I use? I would not use those pelleted synthesized fertilizers. So those plastic balls that are like 10-10-10, I'd never put them anywhere near my garden. I would only ever put them on a lawn. I don't know if there's any fertilizer I would never use other than that. It's just not all fertilizers are appropriate for all things. Like I would never use a water-soluble fertilizer like a Jack's 20-20-20 on my in-ground figs that are 5 years old. Like, why? I used that initially to give them a boost when I first planted them, but I stopped using them entirely and I focused on building rich soil instead. So it's kind of like a time and a place for everything. Phoenix, can you successfully grow corn in containers? I mean, I guess you could, but I would ask you why. Because an entire corn stalk makes 1 ear of corn. So why would you want to go through all that expensive potting mix and all the fertilizer you're going to have to give it to put like 2 or 3 corn stalks in there and get 3 ears of corn? Like you can get 3 ears of corn for $1 at the grocery store, you know? I just wouldn't do that. So I would recommend you not do that. But is it possible? I mean, yeah, anything's possible. Bob Fry, what do you think are eating the tops out of my indoor seedlings? Look underneath the leaves. I mean, I don't know. There's no way of knowing. You just have to really check over the plants really well. Something's got to be there. There's got to be something hiding under the leaves that you're not seeing. I missed a super. Oh, I did. I'm so sorry. Ted Vickner, thank you so much for the contribution. I really, really appreciate it. What is your experience with Pears's disease-resistant grapes? I'm in central Louisiana. Okay, so my knowledge on this is admittedly weak. Grapes are not my strong point. However, when I selected a grape for my yard, I researched a breeder named T.V. Munson. And T.V. Munson, back in the 1800s, he developed a whole bunch of Pears's disease-resistant grapes. Let me see if I can find the article. But these Pears's disease-resistant grapes were made to grow in South Texas. And I am growing a variety called Mrs. Munson. And it is Pears's disease-resistant. This thing is like totally sprayless here. You can grow it completely organically. I'm going to post a link right into the chat. That website from grayson.edu has a big list of all of T.V. Munson's varieties. And not all of them are Pears's disease resistant, but they're all seeded. If you don't mind seeded grapes, the Mrs. Munson is absolutely delicious. And I actually have it linked in my Amazon storefront. You can buy it on Amazon for like $15 or $16. It's dirt cheap. And it is amazing. It's really, really good. So I would recommend that variety. I'm also trying Mars Seedless this year, which is not Pears's disease resistant, but I'm going to try it anyway. And if it eventually dies, it eventually dies. But if I can get 5 to 10 years out of a grape that's really good and seedless, I'll give it a shot. Merciless Melody, how is your memory so good? It's because It's because I truly love this. Like, this is not, I don't like research stuff and then make videos about stuff that I research. I legitimately live this. This is who I am. It's just my passion. So basically what you're asking me to do is talk about stuff that I can literally ramble on and on and on for hours because I love it so much. And basically, the difference between a person that appears intelligent and a person that doesn't appear intelligent is that the person that appears intelligent was lucky enough to find their passion and is living their passion. Everybody's smart about something that they really love to do, you know? So that's really what intelligence is. The God's honest truth is that everybody is talented and everybody is smart and everybody is passionate. It's just the people that think they aren't haven't spent enough time trying to find their passion. So to everybody out there that feels like I'm not good at anything, yeah, you are. You're a prodigy at something. Everybody's a prodigy at something. You just have to find the thing that you're a prodigy at. And I got lucky because I grew up in gardens and I worked on a farm all my teenage years. So I learned from a really young age that this is the thing that I love. So I got lucky in that respect. But whatever, every single person has the ability to be great and everybody's very talented. You just have to find the thing that you're good at. There's a lot of people out there that are better piano players than Mozart, but they never sat down at a piano. That's the thing that's really crazy. We've lost so many prodigies that never sat down to the instrument that they're great at. How soon should you start hardening off seedlings? Sam, you want to harden off your seedlings start 2 weeks before you plant them outside. So whenever your transplant date is, start the process just to be conservative and safe 2 weeks ahead of time. That way you don't have to rush the process and you don't have to feel like I got to get them out before they're ready. So 2 weeks. Catchy handle. You talked about a flower in a past video that could be used to make a repellent or insecticide. Yeah. I'm talking about the pyrethrin daisy or the pyrethrin chrysanthemum. So there are a couple of, I would look up the pyrethrin daisy. That's probably what you're referring to. Glazorg, what type of soil do you recommend for potatoes? I have had poor yields for the past 2 years. When you say potatoes, I'm assuming that you're talking about the nightshade potatoes. And the reason why you're having poor yields is because you're not fertilizing them enough. Potatoes are voracious feeders. They need to be planted in a very, very, very heavy organic matter mix. So something like 50% peat, 50% compost if you're growing them in a container. If you're going to grow them in ground, you have to amend the heck out of them with compost, like dump 4 inches of compost on top of them. You also need to plant them with bone meal, lots and lots of bone meal. And I want you to add organic fertilizer and bone meal and work it into the top couple inches of your soil every 2 weeks without fail. Potatoes need a lot of calcium and phosphorus. And if you're not getting good yields, it's because you're underfeeding them. Now, if you meant sweet potatoes by mistake, sweet potatoes are the absolute opposite. Sweet potatoes will grow beautiful vines if you give them organic matter and lots of nitrogen. They will do horrible, horrible yields. The way you get good sweet potato yields is to plant them in sandy mix with low organic matter, like the junk pine, southern yellow pine sand soil that I have here in North Carolina on the coast. That's the best stuff to grow sweet potatoes in. And you want to give them P and K, but you don't want to give them nitrogen. You want to give them restricted nitrogen, enough that they can grow some leaves. So maybe give them like a 3-5-5 and then amend it with bone meal. And that's really how you get good sweet potatoes. Yeah, Molly, I want to try to do this twice a month during the growing season, just to try and answer these questions and try to get everybody off on the right foot, since now's the time where everybody has questions. So, Dale, Dale, come. Come on, buddy. I have a treat. Dale, come. Oh, here he comes, finally. People are going to think that you're like a fake dog. Come on up. Say hi to everybody. Say hi to all your fans. Come here, my little handsome boy. Gentle. Very good. Very, very good. I just wanted you to say hi to everybody. Say hi, Dale. Dale. Say hi. Do you want another? You're drooling on me, dude. You want another treat? Gentle. Don't eat my hand. Oh, that was so good. That was so good. You want to look out the window? Look out the window. All right, you can go relax. That's all I got for you, buddy. Dale will do anything for a treat. He'd step right over me. Rosella purple dwarf tomato, would you stake or cage? So either work well, but I think this year I'm going to try putting a cage, like the cheap tomato cages that are horrible for tomatoes. They would actually be the right size for a Rosella purple because they only get 24 inches tall. So I'm going to try to cage mine this year and see how they do. Big Will dog in the soil. Do you run any other type of worm bin other than what you showed? I'm assuming you're talking about my composting trash can. Or do you mean the in-ground one that I made? Basically, I have two. I have a trash can that I fill up with compost. I compost all my kitchen scraps, every day. And then I also have an in-ground container that I buried around my apple trees, and then I dump things that I don't put in my above ground compost in that. So things like fruit with seeds in it, citrus peels, onion peels, things like that that I wouldn't want to put inside my composting trash can because seeds could germinate in the compost. Well, when you bury it underground, you don't have to worry about that. So I use those two systems, but I don't raise worms or anything like that. I've never really had a need. Anytime I stick my hand into the soil around my fruit trees and things like that, I usually pull out a worm. So I just attract them through good old fashioned composting. Merciless Melody. Who are your favorite gardening channels? My absolute favorite's my buddy James Prigioni. So he's genuinely my favorite gardening channel. He has a completely different style than I do. I'm basically like an information nerd, and I guess the videos that I make, if you're not particularly interested in the subject, you're probably not going to want to watch the video. But he's just a person. He's just a character. So basically, his videos are just very motivating, and basically, I like, they help me get excited for the season. So I really very much enjoy that. I also like Travis from Lazy Dog Farm. He lives in Southwest Georgia, so he has a climate very similar to mine. So I absolutely love his channel. I also absolutely love Pete Canaris from Green Dreams. He lives down in Central Florida, and his business is basically installing food forests. That's what he does. He's a landscaper, except he goes around to people's yards and he turns backyards into food forests, and he does it in like a week. So his channel is absolutely incredible. So I'd recommend him. I also like Andrew Millison's channel. He basically likes sustainable systems. He's a Pacific Northwest Oregon grower, but he likes going out to places like the Sahara Desert and show how they're collecting water in desert climates and making green spaces and really cool stuff like that. So those are some of my favorites. Yeah, I would recommend them. What's your favorite grandma's recipe? I don't have any recipes. I don't follow recipes. I cook with feeling. I kind of I kind of just I just taste as I go. So I don't follow any recipes for anything unless I'm baking. Um, and I very rarely bake. I eat very little flour in general. So I'm not much of a baker, but that's the only time I would ever follow a recipe. To me, I believe cooking is art and baking is math. So if I'm cooking, I'm not following a recipe. The most I'll ever do if I want to make something new is I'll watch a YouTube video and I'll see what the ingredients are and I'll watch the process. And then I'll just copy the process. Blazorg, how do you recommend to control cabbage moth caterpillars? This is what I covered in the beginning. You may have missed it, but I recommend either BT or spinosad concentrate. They're both a natural organic bacteria that kill worms and caterpillars. BT kills exclusively worms or caterpillars. So if you spray all your plants down with BT, it's only going to kill the worms and the caterpillars. It's not going to hurt the bees, the ladybugs, the dragonflies, anything like that. Spinosad is broader spectrum, so it will kill other things. But the only way that BT and spinosad are effective is if the animals eat the soaked and coated leaves. So it has to be ingested in both cases. So if you want to be really conservative and you don't want any fallout for pollinators, the guaranteed way to do that is to use BT. If you need a broader spectrum killer, spinosad is the way to go. Yeah, I do watch Kevin from Epic Gardening now and then, but I don't watch his general gardening videos. I watch mostly his homesteading videos because that's me. I garden so much that, I don't like watching straight gardening content because that's kind of the life that I live. I like watching the stuff that I aspire to do more. So I really like the homesteading and food forest content. Oh yeah, I also really like Todd from Sleepy Lizard Farms because I'm obsessed with growing avocados. So I'd strongly recommend his channel as well. What's the best okra to grow? Not only have I never grown okra, I have never tasted okra. I may live in the South, but I'm from New Jersey, so I don't know nothing about no okra. I'm not the guy to ask. If you want to know how to grow okra, I would recommend you look up Travis from Lazy Dog Farm. He grows a lot of okra. He knows what grows in the South a million times better than me. So he is the one that you want to go to. I'm not even going to pretend. Piggly Wiggly's fried okra was good last time I had it. Look, I'm going to make a blanket statement here. If you're breading it and frying it, that doesn't necessarily mean that you like the thing. It means you like the breading and frying. I don't. Does breaded and fried okra really count as okra? Does it really? I'm not so sure about that. I bet you I would like that too. But I don't know. A lot of people say that okra has a mucusy texture. I don't know if that's actually true because, like I said, I've never really eaten it. At least I don't think I have. But I could see how frying it would fix that. Any grow bag advice? I'm trying broccoli. I made a video like a year and a half ago that's basically a complete guide on growing in grow bags. I would recommend you watch that. Um, I don't see why you couldn't grow broccoli in a grow bag, but you'll probably need like a 20 or 25-gallon grow bag to give them enough space to fit at least, 6 or 8 heads. Michelle Munich, will avocados grow in Northwest North Carolina? No, they will not, unless you have a heated greenhouse structure. The only other way you could grow an avocado is in a container and overwintering it, but you'd probably need a supplemental grow light. And avocados are not known to fruit very well in a container. So if you really want to grow something in a container that'll actually produce, I would tell you to grow like a mango instead of an avocado. Unfortunately, if you can't grow an avocado in ground, I would recommend not really bothering. It's probably not the answer you want to hear, but I'm just being honest. What is neem oil good for? Draining your wallet. That is about it. Uh, Also, it's really good at making your yard stink. It's good at burning the foliage. It's good at making the food taste absolutely disgusting. And then you have to scrub everything down with hot soapy water just to make it edible. I would not use neem oil if they were paying me to use neem oil because I would not sell out my own credibility to promote neem oil. I am anti neem oil. I don't think it is good for anything more than a simple vegetable oil spray. And you can get vegetable oil for $10 a gallon. Neem oil is $130 a gallon. So I would recommend not buying neem oil unless you want to make soap with neem oil. Apparently, it's good for making soap, but I don't know why anybody would want to smell like neem oil. I think I would rather smell BO than neem oil. I don't like neem oil. If you've had success with neem oil and you think it works well, by all means use it. I just haven't had any success personally, and I think the smell is absolutely atrocious. And once I ate a tomato that I did not wash well enough after using neem oil because I didn't realize how sticky it was, and I think I would rather eat an unripened persimmon than that. What about azamaz? I don't know what that is. That sounds like a. It sounds like if I say that enough times, my carpet will start levitating. I don't know what azamaz is. Azamax? Oh, is that like that? Is that like that combination? Yeah, I think that's like a combination insecticidal soap, neem oil, or something like that. I wouldn't waste my money. I would just either make a dish soap spray. I would just make a dish soap spray with vegetable oil for the cost of 9 cents, rather than spend my money on that. Oh, azomite. Azomite's great. Azomite is a natural deposit that they mine, I think, from Utah, and it's a great trace supplement. And they've micronized it so you can actually pass it through fertigation, through drip irrigation. I have a big old bag of azomite. That's good stuff. I would recommend azomite. Do you add trace minerals to your soil? I add so much compost that I don't need a lot, but sometimes I do dust things down with azomite once or twice a year because it's super cheap. You can get a 50-pound bag for like 40 bucks. I think my azomite's like 3 years old and I still have half of it. So a little bit of dust here and there, it's good stuff. You can't kill commercials on YouTube unless you pay for YouTube Premium. Remember, 10 years ago, we were all spending $130 a month on cable for 900 channels, and we only wanted 2 of them. Well, YouTube's totally free, and you can pull up whatever you want, for the cost of $0, and you occasionally have to watch a 9-second skippable ad. I mean, there's less ads on YouTube than on cable that you're paying $100 a month for. So I just deal with it. If we didn't have ads on YouTube, nobody would make content. So we'd go back to the day when it was 10-second videos of people falling downstairs, which I support. But yeah, I mean, I think a 30-minute sitcom is actually 22 minutes and 8 minutes of ads. So YouTube has a third of the ads of that, and it's free. So just something to consider. Do you can any of your produce? Do you have a root cellar? There are no basements here in North Carolina because the water table is like 12 inches deep, and we get 1,000,000 inches of rain a year. So no, I don't have a root cellar, but I have gotten into making jams and jellies. So yeah, I've made fig jam and persimmon jam. That's great. I also have a food mill, so when I have an overabundance of tomatoes, I process them into tomato puree, and I have like a 25-quart pot that I make the world's largest pot of tomato sauce and meatballs, and then I eat meatballs for about 7 days straight. So that's what I do. I have had the Marconi pepper, I think. Yeah, a giant Marconi. I believe I grew that last year and it was pretty good. I start to get these varieties confused. But yeah, I think I believe that's a pretty good one. I think it's like a big bullhorn. Question: how do you learn when and what to feed your soil? Well, there are some things that are always true about soil, and you always want to make sure you maintain a layer of compost and a layer of mulch, because you're always trying to, at some degree, protect the first few inches of soil from bleaching from the sun, and you're always trying to emulate a forest floor to some degree. So no matter what you're growing, unless you're growing a mango or a coconut palm, which literally grows in sand, everything else you're pretty much going to want to have a nice thick layer of compost and mulch at all times. Now, in terms of fertilizer, the way you learn what to do is by observation, by trial and error. You add things and you observe and you see how they do. For most people, all they're really going to need is something like an organic 555 fertilizer and a bone meal supplement. And giving your plants that a few times a year is often all they need. The only real exception to that rule is when you're planting high density vegetable gardens. If you're really trying to push the production of your peppers and your tomatoes and other things that have high nutrient demands and aren't truly natural plants, they're the product of generations of breeding and in no way, shape, or form emulate their natural wild ancestors. Well, they demand so much from the soil, and we have them planted in such high density that it's totally unnatural. In those cases, it's often beneficial to add water-soluble nutrition to try and boost their growth. But that is up to you. A lot of those means are not organic, and if you want to stay 100% organic, it can become expensive very quickly, hence the cost of organic produce. So you kind of have to weigh your options. How organic do you want to be? How much money do you want to spend? Is the dollar per production worth what you're getting? And the only way you're going to learn is by doing it and keeping a journal and making honest comparisons and evaluating your successes and failures. And eventually you'll get good over time. Can you start garlic now? Yes, but I don't know how good it's going to go, especially if you live decently far south. I mean, if you live in Maine, you're going to have a lot better luck since it's going to be cold there for a while. If you want to run that experiment, what I recommend you do is you go to the grocery store and you just buy garlic, 3 heads for $1.50, and you plant that. I would not go out and spend $50 on some really expensive seed garlic and take the risk now. So would I buy? I bought 3 heads of garlic at Lidl today for $1.50. Would I plant that and run the experiment? Yeah, you got nothing to lose. But I would not spend all that money on expensive garlic right now. Anya T, are hybrid F1 tomato seeds worth it? Worth it? They're all I grow. I think the heirlooms aren't worth it. If you live here and you grow the heirlooms, you're probably not going to get many tomatoes. So, yes, if it's a variety that you actually like the taste of. My favorite tomato on the planet is Brandy Boy, which is an F1 hybrid. And then after that, it's a toss-up between, well, let's see. Brandy Boy is my favorite. Sun Gold is my second favorite. Super Sweet 100 is my third. And then we have Carmelo and Big Beef. So those are my 5 favorite tomatoes, and every single one of them is an F1 hybrid. All of them are incredible. But I mean, that's up to you. The only way you're going to figure it out is by growing different things. If I still lived in New Jersey, I'd be growing way more heirlooms than I grow now. But heirlooms don't do well here. It's too hot. It's too humid. We get too much rain. If I were back in Atlantic County, New Jersey, where I was born, I would probably grow maybe a quarter of my crop as heirlooms, just for some interesting varieties. But yeah, the only way you're going to find out is by trying. Branch vine. Have you tried growing Space Master cucumbers? No. The cucumbers I'm growing this year are Merlin. You know what? Let me bring up my spreadsheet. My grow lights just, oh my God, it's 10 o'clock. Y'all are making me lose track of time. I'll tell you what cucumbers I'm growing this year. Bear with me. All right. I am growing Party Time, Merlin, Diamant. I didn't update the spreadsheet. See, I also ordered seeds for Isnick, H19 Little Leaf, and I forget the other. It was a free pack of seed from Tomato Growers. So that's primarily what I'm growing. Party Time, Merlin, Diamant, Isnick, H19 Little Leaf, and some kind of free pickling cucumber. And all of them are parthenocarpic. They don't require pollination at all. So hoping for some good stuff. Old man butt wrinkles. Do you save your own seed? Nah, I don't. Most of what I grow are F1 hybrids, so I can't save them. And yeah, you can really only grow your seed, save your own seed, if you grow things in isolation. So I grow so many different varieties of things, everything cross-pollinates. So there's really no point. None of my seed is really going to grow true, and I buy mostly F1s anyway. So no, I don't save seed. All right, y'all, my voice is starting to give out on me. I've been here for a little bit over 2 hours, and I still have to eat dinner. So I am going to sign off for the evening. Thank you all so much for joining the live stream. I appreciate it so much. I will try to do another one in early March as well, because my goal this year is to talk to as many of you as possible and try to help you through the rigmarole of seed starting and transplanting and all of those things. So again, I appreciate you all so much. Thank you for supporting my channel. Thank you for joining the live stream. Thank you to everybody that made a monetary contribution. I really appreciate it. I can't make these videos without you. So thank you all. God bless, and I hope to see you all very soon.